What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the 817 podcast. Jimmy and I have a special guest today that we want to deliver right before Election Day. We are posting this November 2nd, but we had this conversation with Lape, a micro-influencer here in Fort Worth who has nearly 13,000 followers that's localized here in Tarrant County. So she has a great understanding of the digital community and how to interact with people, especially in hard times when in 2020 we have COVID, Black Lives Matter, and now this very polarizing election. And so I'm going to be stressed. I bet you have a lot of anxiety. And so she's going to help us manage that anxiety and how can we best support one another. So let's get to the show.
I was born and raised in Arkansas and I was raised in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. I went to University of Arkansas, got a degree in marketing management. Sam Walton had the whole spiel of being raised around Walmart and corporate America and all those kind of things. And got married to my husband, who also was at the University of Arkansas. And we just decided, let's get out of here. Let's do something different. And we moved to downtown Vancouver, British Columbia.
Wow.
And yeah, we really, we fell in love with just an urban lifestyle, being just downtown. We didn't have a car. We just really, really loved the city as a whole. Yeah. But whenever we got pregnant, we started kind of grappling with the idea of relationships with grandparents and what that looks like, as well as housing prices, which are ridiculous in Vancouver. It makes no sense. It's absolutely unfeasible. And so we thought, if we're going to have to move out to the suburbs in Vancouver, we could just move out to the suburbs somewhere else and be closer to family. And we really just we knew about Fort Worth. My father was raised here, and I have some extended family who lives in Fort Worth. And we just kind of thought, yeah, that's great. There's an international airport right there. It's not Dallas. And then we that sounds bad, but I mean, you get it. Yeah. And we just when we landed, we thought, I don't know, because we moved here when I was 30 weeks pregnant, which is one of the worst times to try to casually find a community and to meet people, to hope to start fresh and all of those kind of things. And so I just relied very heavily on social media. I was already really interested in marketing and content creation, all these kind of things, and was kind of studying how that fit into Fort Worth. And just being a mom, parenting can be pretty isolating, and I don't think anyone really ever prepares you for that. And so being able to have social media and have all of these connections, and all of a sudden just kind of an instant connection to this new community, this new city that I was in, it was amazing. And so I just kind of kept doing that. And then as my audience grew and stuff like that, I mean, it was all kind of stuff I did during that time, but it was also kind of something that was for me. Also as a parent, it's very easy to get your entire life wrapped up into your children. Yeah. And so to have this kind of side thing where I felt like I was immersed in this world of digital marketing and influencer marketing and studying social media trends, while also trying to navigate what parenthood looked like and things like that. But yeah, I feel like the digital community in Fort Worth has been so much more of my involvement, because I feel like I connect with so many people online, and there are so many people that I've never met in person. But if you were to ask me, I would say that I have a personal relationship with them.
Yeah. And how do you feel about that kind of long term, as even just being a newish mother and having your kids having connections like that too? And how do you feel cities interact with, we're the first kind of really young professionals who our cities are not just who we know in person, but also who we know virtually. And how do you feel that system plays together with digital Fort Worth and then
in-person Fort Worth?
Well, in person, I feel like in-person me is so different from digital me because, even right now, my kids are in the other room. Yeah. In-person me, there's probably going to be kids running around, and there's going to be a little bit more of Jimmy, you're not at the stage yet, but whenever the kids start really interrupting you, that is a whole different world of learning how to have conversations within 2-minute time frames. And so that's one of the things that I really loved about Fort Worth, and we joke with a lot of our friends that I describe it as a city made by millennials who are growing older and having families and realize that we can do things outside of just having to go to the Olive Garden every week. We have all these things that we want to be involved in the community. And so you go to places where, obviously before COVID, I would take my son with me to coffee shops, and I would take my kids with me, and it would, what feels like a potentially chaotic environment, I just felt like in-person Fort Worth welcomed that with open arms. And they embraced the idea of having young families in there. And that was something that immediately stood out to me because, of course, when we moved here, we didn't know anybody. And I relied pretty heavily, coming from Vancouver, we relied heavily on the coffee shop scene. I remember being, I moved here about 4.5 years ago.
Okay, cool.
We were very pregnant with my son, and so that is an easy reminder of when I can easily go back and look at that. And so about 4.5 years ago, we rolled into town and knowing just a couple people, and so we knew that we wanted to be in, like, we sought out public spaces that were available. So at that point, I think like Clear Fork was just becoming a thing. There was right across the street from Craftwork Magnolia. Whenever that opened, they had that little park for kids, that little pop-up park. And so we relied really heavily on those open spaces that we could kind of exist, because that really, we saw a lot of that where we used to live. And so that was something that we knew as a way to connect to other people. And of course, I have no social anxiety. So the idea, and that's, the idea of saying hi to a stranger is not intimidating to me, which is also part of that building digital connection.
That's awesome. One thing that I know that we really appreciate about you is how open you are about the things that you're passionate about on social media. What is that like? Like, as you were getting into this influencer marketing space, when did you decide that you were going to be you in it, that you weren't going to cover up a lot of the topics that a lot of people maybe try to steer away from? And what's a lot of the response that you've gotten for that?
Yeah, that was tricky. So I'm still what you would consider a micro influencer. Yeah. There are a lot of bigger names, even in Fort Worth. But the thing about it is that I want to always, I don't want to say that I'm being authentic, because I don't want to imply that other people are not.
Yeah.
But I always, I rely on this digital connection, because my life outside of this is a lot of being at home and then prepping for marketing, things like that. So there's a bit of, to show up in a digital space, there's a bit of responsibility to other people to say, I'm going to be authentic in a way that is, to me, that's part of the contract of this job, to say, if you're willing to follow along with me, I appreciate that. But this is also a part of me.
Yeah.
This is also a part of our world. And I would be doing a disservice to my audience, to people that call me friend and things like that, if I was just to skip over that and go, these are really great donuts. That's awesome. Everything is great right now. Because I've got people who are like, who are dealing with a lot. I think we're all dealing with a lot. And so I remember, I think it was that night when tear gas was used here in Fort Worth. And that was when my husband and I sat down and we just were kind of like, okay, we have to make out a list of what we are comfortable with putting out there and what are hard, not going to talk about lines. What constitutes a private conversation versus what is going to be said, and how that leads into a constructive conversation. And I think that is where you get a lot of, miscommunication. And that's where a lot of influencers get a lot of their reputation for being able to sweep things under the rug, is the idea that you kind of have to just sit down with your person and say, what are we going to say? Like we have to say something. So what is it? What does it look like? And then also taking into account your audience. A lot of my audience are white, affluent women. So what does that look like? What is the message going to be to white, affluent women in or around Fort Worth on how we can make a difference right now? And that's hard, you know?
Yeah, sure.
I would say I've gotten a real mixed response. And I think a lot of that comes from, I don't know if it's a specific Fort Worth or if it is a just Southern mentality as a whole, but a lot of, just very, very nice. Everyone is very nice.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful. Nice is great.
Yeah.
But at some point you have to distinguish where that line is between nice and kind, because sometimes the kind thing is to speak up. And a lot of times we think that nice means let's preserve friendships by not speaking up. Let's not bring up things that are divisive. But in actuality, the kind thing to do is to bring that up.
I'm curious. You could say I'm not going to answer that because we could just edit it. But you said you had a line of things, a line that you guys said you will and will not talk about. What is on the will talk about, and what's like I'm staying over here, keeping it personal?
Yeah. Okay. So,
being that,
like, definitely,
I haven't done that conversation with my wife or with my podcaster wife, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know what this is. But, I feel like this conversation.
A lot of it is just because it also represents Kyle, and I want him to know that I'm okay with it. And for now, I am still mentoring with my church, and so I also wanted to make sure that I respect them by not having any sort of mismanagement of how I represent myself online. And so one of the things, let's see, absolutely pro Black Lives Matter. 100%. There's no way not to. I think, especially with the audience of white affluent women, that gets really hard to kind of work around the blurry line of discussing police brutality publicly.
Yeah.
And so, kind of that's an example of things that we sat down going, okay, how do we discuss police? Will I discuss police from my platform? Or will I, figuring out how to do that? Because a lot of times I'll get DMs and I'll get questions. I'm like, hey, that's just something I am happy to talk about with you. But as a platform broadcasting to like just under 13,000 people, that could get convoluted really easily. Yeah. And for it being such an emotional, things like school, like right now with COVID, school, I'm while we're doing everything possible, it is such a personal, individualistic decision that it's so hard. Of course, I don't agree with the protests and unmasking ourselves, asking to send us back to school, but I'm also not going to talk about school stuff specifically because one, I have a kid that's in pre-K, so a lot of that isn't directly applicable to me. And also because we're in a really privileged position because my husband works from home and my mother-in-law moved in with us in mid-April to kind of ride out this quarantine situation. She was high risk and working in medical field in Oklahoma. And we just said, come on. Like we're underwater right now with these kids. We were all slowly losing our minds. And we were just like, quit your job, come live with us until this is over, until we feel good about. And so I'm in a place where
I don't want my mom
if
to be
someone
listening
says,
to this episode.
I know, sorry.
Not joking.
No, but I'm in a place where I can easily say, keep your kid home. But that's so different for other people. So kind of figuring out what that line is so important. But that also means, to figure out that line also means that I have to actively confront my own privilege and actively confront my own distance from situations. Which is also something a lot of people that happen to be white, that happen to be women, don't like to do.
How often do you get DMs asking to talk about those things that you won't talk about on your platform? Because I know that you will post stories saying, like, if you want to have a conversation about this, like, DM me and let's have a phone call or let's do a Zoom and talk about it.
Yeah.
How often do people take you up on that?
Okay, so it's kind of calmed down a little bit, and I think that just everyone is getting a little bit stressed out. But there was a time where I was probably having 3 phone calls a week with someone I didn't know or barely knew, and then like maybe 1 Zoom phone call a week where people were just really, really basic things where people would say, "Can you explain Black Lives Matter to me?" And I'm like, yeah. Or can you explain why, like that hashtag Save the Children is arguably dangerous? And I'm like, yeah, but that is totally not something that I can do through text. And honestly, it's doing a disservice to that person, and it's doing a disservice to my family to try to navigate that through text over the course of a day, rather than sitting down and going, let's talk for 30 minutes really fast. Let's just dive into it. Please respect each other while we have this conversation.
I'm really excited I feel like when we hang out, when that happens, as another non-social anxiety, zero social anxiety, when we hang out, I'm really excited to just because I believe I'm such a believer that we have these different realities. And so like when you say, you're part of your church, your followers are affluent white women, this is like all literally, I might see like 1 affluent white woman per month in my life, in my reality over here in Fort Worth. And so I would love to just because I'm a believer in that, like when the door is closed and it's just people who are like each other talking, you get different conversations. What are conversations around that are happening in closed doors among your community that's maybe closed when it's just your community that are happening around, for instance, Amy Comey Barrett and that kind of stuff, the election, how often do you feel like it's grace and it's calm, or do you ever feel like you have to stop and acknowledge things when maybe it disagrees with you? What does that look like? I always say the real talking happens when people are comfortable behind the doors around people that are like them, that they trust.
Honestly, well, since I've put myself out there, I feel like I've expected the potential for people to maybe retreat a little bit in the sake of preserving friendships, whatever that looks like. And I don't know if this is arguably a more frustrating answer, but I honestly don't think it's talked about much. I think that a lot of moms, women, affluent white women can simply say the news is really, really stressful, so I'm going to turn it off, and we're going to do something else. We're going to watch Mulan over and over today, and we're gonna, and they just do these things to just ignore it, and that's kind of part of just. I know you guys talked about it in a few episodes back, just a sort of unwillingness to change, or when you're confronted with the possibility of change, that it's just almost like a paralyzing thing, where when things are so bad, I just have to turn it off. And that mentality, in my opinion, is pretty dangerous, but I think that is a lot of the conversation that you'll hear is just the privilege of being able to say, this is very stressful, right? Let's turn it off.
Got it. Yeah, I think, and then the reason why I asked is, I mean, so my co-founder in our business, he's from Allen, Texas, comes from success, financial success, but also lives in Wilmington, North Carolina now. Backyard's the golf course. You know, if he has a party, you know, I'll be the person of color that shows up. And I believe when there is people of color in the room, people then change their gears. They'll get on less cruise control. But then when that door closes, and if it's just the white men on the golf course, if it's just the you know, whatever's going on at a coffee shop, it's then where the doors open. And it's interesting to hear that it's still face of like, we don't get to open up and have transparent conversations still.
And to be fair, that could also be just a part of women, of being a mom, of the dynamic of female friendships and things like that. So there's all kinds of variables that go into that. Because I mean, you know, you hear all the time the idea of self-care and self-help and things like that. Whenever you talk to a mom, especially the younger they are, the more likely they're losing their mind. And almost always they'll be like, I'm good. Like, let's not go into it. And so to add into that and be like, hey, how do you feel about like the children at the border who are separated from their parents cruelly? It's like, oh my gosh, that's a lot to like bring up over coffee when I haven't gotten, you know, and it's kind of that mentality to say, let's just not.
Yeah.
So recently you've been posting a lot about voting. That's obviously the really relevant topic right now. What's the response you've gotten to that? And what's your pulse on where, Tarrant County is? Because I do think that you interact with a different circle than EJ does and that I do a lot of the time. So what is your pulse from people that respond to those posts or to those stories?
I think it's good. I think the first it's good as a whole. That's my go-to answer. But I'm not afraid of confrontation.
Yeah.
And so I think that's also worth specifying. So when back when Prop A was on the ballot, that was my first little hint of nonpartisanship or partisan. And all I did was include it, and I got quite a few DMs and quite a few messages being like, I'm shocked to see that you're voting this way and this. And so I was like, okay, well, this is going to get rough as the year continues, because how do I lean into some of my beliefs? And that's where that idea of being someone who, it feels like in this society of women who, I don't know if we're taught or if it's just a normalized habit to not talk about things, to be someone who says, actually, yeah, like I voted, and it's not, you know, it's not, it doesn't have to be a glamorous campaign. It doesn't have to be like something, but it's a huge deal. And it's also worth noting, and it's worth doing. And I think that, I don't know, it just, voting is such a unique thing because, and I think you guys hit on this too, just the idea that it gets so much talked about for presidential elections, and then the local elections and things like that kind of taper off. And so I'd really love to see more specifically women showing a passion for local politics and showing a passion for sparking change, because especially if we feel like we can't even bring it up in a conversation because it's so depressing, it's like, you can do something about it. You actually have the power to, and you can be doing this. But I just think a lot of, and again, I always go back, sorry guys, I always go back to the idea that it's sort of an internalized patriarchy where women are like, we can't do anything. It is what it is, and we can't do anything about it. So let's just enjoy the status quo and enjoy this moment of peace that we get. But in actuality, you can do something better, and even if it's showing up in the voting line.
Yeah. I mean, I have two questions, and I think the first question probably makes the most sense to ask now. Because what you said, you're from Arkansas, which
I am.
Which, if we put it in the list of like the state that Trump for sure has, Arkansas is number one.
Mm-hmm.
But then you spent your time in Vancouver, which is very different than Arkansas. And so what I think is really cool there, though, it kind of gave you the battle scars, if you would, if you needed to then come to Fort Worth, which I feel like then is like more of a blend of those two places in a city. Mm-hmm. And maybe also why you've had great success with social media and connecting with people is because of those experiences. What do you feel is Fort Worth, like things that Fort Worth might need to get over or have tough conversations around, that it's currently baked in our DNA as a city?
Oh man. I think immediately what comes to my mind is just taking social media seriously. And that feels like such a umbrella statement of sorts. But I mean, we saw it, especially this year, whenever everything started closing down. We saw the businesses who had the social media game already going. Yeah. We saw, because we needed to know who was open. We needed to know who was doing drive-through. All these kind of who was like switching up their plans for all these things. And I'm hoping that was really a wake-up call to just small businesses as a whole. To obviously, like with COVID, that was a wake-up call in a really rough way. I'm not going hard on them in that way. But just the importance of social media, and it's not just throw it at whoever's doing this. It's not just something to do in the spare time. It actually does involve quite a bit of strategy, quite a bit of thought process, and that's part of that Fort Worth landscape change. That it's not just our city changing on the outside and our city changing and what we're building and what we're doing and things like that, but it's also changing the way that we are digitally representing ourselves, and that our businesses come strong and they show up in excellence and things like that. And I'd love to see more of that. Yeah. Not just we throw up a couple pictures here with a filter, but really putting thought and strategy behind what they're posting. And I think I'd love to see more of that within the small business community and just Fort Worth as a whole.
Yeah. Awesome.
What did you have another question?
Well, my other question was, it's going to be more, I guess, about it was going to be more about the political side of since it's going to be posted right the day before the election. Just kind of what is your belief of why, if we just look at the data, I guess, of who supports Trump, right? The majority is white males, and then also he has a strong Christian presence as well. So what do you think is the, I guess, hack there with why are we coded to still trust Trump during this time? Like, I guess I'm asking, why is that? What is the love for Trump in potentially some of the communities or even the people who follow you, who even how he talks about women, how he talks about not treating people correctly and creating ruckus, creating hate. I mean, he is losing a lot in the women vote this time, which looks like he might be the reason why he doesn't turn out to win. So what is your take there, and what's your read from your followers, your community, and
so.
And if you don't want to talk about it, that's also cool.
No. I can totally talk about it. I was just thinking, I was like, the way you described him was the most understated way I would have. we've said so many worse things. Yeah. And I was like, what a beautiful diplomatic way to describe that situation. No, I think I actually just read a really good book about this that helped me kind of sort through that even within my own mind, because I struggle with it too, to see people who like we study the same Bible with, and I'm sitting here going, what are you? I just can't wrap my head around it. And so I just read a book recently that separates Christian nationalism from Christianity, from evangelism, and from what nationalism is, and kind of help me understand a little bit more about that mindset. Not that I necessarily want to, but it helped me not be so frustrated with so many people, I feel like. And the way I would describe it is that, in my opinion, I'm sure I'm going to get like blown up with DMs after this with people who being like, you got it wrong. But the best way I can describe it is that it seems like a lot of people think that he's a necessary evil for getting things done that do good things, which, like, you hear, I can't even get through the sentence without laughing about. But there are people who follow me that really love his policies, and I don't understand how, but they do. And they'll say, I don't like him, I don't like what he stands for, but I'm going to do that. And and thinking that it's kind of a necessary evil. And I think that's really a shame to me, because I mean, maybe it's just because I'm quite proud, even though obviously, like, Biden, I don't think Biden was Biden's, like, we were so happy that he got the nomination, but I'm quite proud to have cast my vote for him. And I'm proud to be able to say that I did everything in my power to help get this man elected. And it's hard for me to wrap my mind around the idea that I'm not in whenever I cast a vote. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think that's what it is. And even after Election Day in 2016, I remember being really uncomfortable for a few days, which sounds, I hear how privileged that sounds. Okay. But you have to, all of these women that I was involved with, these new friendships that I made, everyone was just quiet because it felt like they got their way.
Yeah.
They won, but no one was particularly happy or proud about it. And so it's kind of this, a lot of what my presence is just to just kind of being someone who says, hey, our kids play together. We're in the same world together. We go to the same, activities. We again study the same Bible, and yet I'm in your social circle, and I think very differently, because I think a lot of people just haven't had that.
Yeah.
They haven't been confronted with the idea that there are people struggling, and that is largely in part because of the mentality of saying things are stressful, I'm turning it off.
Yeah.
Things are stressful, I'm getting off of social media. Which, don't get me wrong, I think it's great to take breaks from social media, but also that's how we are able to find out about injustice, about things going on at the border, about all the mistreatment of people as a whole, is because we're able to have that at our fingertips now. And so to actively turn that off is it's really hard, because I understand that a lot of people struggle with the idea of having to take in that kind of anxiety and stress, but that's people's lives. Yeah. You can't just turn it off.
Yeah.
And that's where that kind of being kind and being nice. Being nice is saying, I don't want to talk about it. Let's just have a good day. Being kind is saying, we're going to talk about it because I have issues.
Yeah.
And I think we are that, like, first generation that really has influence, that does have that at our fingertips. And we grew up where you could just walk away from it, because if you didn't watch the news or you didn't read the newspaper, you didn't know about any of this happening. And while there are things happening today that are more serious and different from what happened in the 90s, like there's a lot of the same racial struggle happening, but it was a lot easier to be shielded from it. And so I think that is an interesting thing that we're having to engage
at this
with
point
now.
At this point, if you're shielding yourself from it, you have to intentionally choose to walk away from it.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, that's wrong.
Yeah. It's and the reason, and I just appreciate this interview, and I feel like it's a very good one, even just for myself, and just to hear your process and how you walk through life. Because I struggle with, I'm really struggling for people who vote for Donald Trump. Like, I have a short list of, like, I'm trying to figure out how do I still love you if you vote for Donald Trump. That's how high anxiety I have around how it's being so missed. I mean, a great example, and she is someone I'm not 100% sure if she is voting for Trump, because we won't have that conversation. I know my dad is, so it's my stepmom, who is Baptist, white lady from rural Texas, walks on pro-life walks. Last post on Facebook was a pro-life shirt with my dad, with my stepsisters. And we don't have, I love her. I legitimately love my stepmom, and she's a great lady. But then I know her and my dad are going to vote for Donald Trump because of pro-life. And it eats at me because I just don't get it. But I feel like that is happening to a lot of families, where even if you're not a family of color or whatever, I think that's a lot of, even like young millennials are like, why is my grandparents or my dad still doing that? Because of that one thing, and even the interpretation of that one thing. So I just really been appreciating this conversation. I don't know if you have anything to say there on that, but this is just the feelings I'm having from what you're saying.
I think that's really valid. Absolutely. And it's so hard because it's almost like, and this is just coming from me being someone who loves to immerse myself in cult and murder podcasts, but it's almost like taking on you have to think about it as somebody who is going through a sort of like brainwashing. And, that is not just a cult thing that happens a lot in in a lot of things and aspects of life. But you just kind of have to think about it from that aspect. I think there are a lot of families, including ours as well, as we kind of navigate what that looks like. And just that decision of when to say something versus when not to. And, the way I described it to somebody was, I said, what happens whenever somebody comes out of a cult is they're gutted. They're completely destroyed. You know what I mean? It's the worst feeling in the world. And I don't want to be that person who makes them feel like that.
Yep.
But I hope that I can be somebody that they feel like they can go to should they start feeling that way. Should they start having things where they say, wow, this isn't lining up. But just like we see with, again, going back to all the cult podcasts, like with boom, 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 just like you see with all of those, you can't make someone see something when they don't want to see it, no matter how obvious it is. And you just have to say, I'm going to be here for when you do, because when they do, it's going to be a hard hit. And I firmly believe that a lot of people are going to see it, hopefully, within our lifetime.
And I think this is a good last question, unless you have another question. I think a lot of them might see that November 3rd, tomorrow. You see how I did that there? We're not recording this on November 2nd, but
definitely tomorrow.
Yeah. So, but when it is if it's a Joe Biden landslide, if Texas goes blue, if the Senate goes blue, the House goes blue, the president's blue, the blue wave happens. Mm-hmm. How do you think social media is going to react to a Joe Biden win? And how do you think it's going to react to a Trump win? And how should we be reacting regardless who wins is basically my question.
I think that either way, social media is going to be very, very stressful all the way through Christmas. That is my expectation. That just setting, I think, as an individual going forward with social media use, I think it's okay to set boundaries and to say it's okay to unfollow, because I think that either way, it's what's so hard in my mind is because when people try to say you can celebrate your side but not the other. So, in my opinion, it's okay to celebrate a Joe Biden win, because I think that's an incredible win. to celebrate a Trump win feels like a celebration of racism and fascism and all of these terrible, terrible policies. So it's really hard to say unfollow anybody who does that. But I would say be gentle on yourself and set boundaries for just an individualistic attitude towards social media, because it's going to be rough. And I think both sides are going to be actively in your face. We did it, whichever side comes out. And I think just kind of having a grip on our own stability, which this has not been the year for stability. So that's a really hard thing to go into and suggest that we all kind of have on a solid head on our shoulders. But I don't know. I think one of the biggest things is, I think will be interesting to see how businesses respond and how brands respond. Yeah. Personally, that's my own, because I think that as far as just individuals, I think it's going to be a pretty hot mess. Yeah. And I think either way, I think you'll see a lot of people focusing on mental health, especially. You probably already are, because it's definitely November 2nd. And so you're going to see a lot of more mental health, things like that, people focusing on just the stress and anxiety of the election. And I'm so interested to see how Fort Worth businesses and things like that, because there are definitely some that have taken a stance, some that have hinted at a stance and things like that. And so I'm really interested to see how that affects our landscape, because if a business is openly supported, either Trump or Biden, are people going to stop going? Are people going to stop? Like those kind of things. After that, if a business is openly supported Black Lives Matter and Trump wins, what does that look like for the business? Is that going to affect the business? Is that going to be good? Is that going to be bad? It's just, there's a lot of questions. Yeah. So,
yeah, I think, honestly, even me and my wife, every time we stress, like our natural comments are like, oh, I don't know what I would do if Trump wins. Oh, it's like a lot of like the anxiety is, and November 2nd, night before, I bet that's going to be the question. We're all going to be laying in our beds, going to sleep, and be like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen tomorrow? And I don't know if I can handle it. I don't know if I can handle it.
And I can't even imagine that, because just as our entire family is super white, we're so pale. And so, the idea, there's a different duty, in my opinion, for white people right now on social media. And I think that because I think the overarching anxieties that people of color are dealing with are not going to go away. They're going to get worse. And so I think that specifically white people who consider themselves allies should be actively engaging and just doing everything in their power to obviously help with the election, but also take care of our neighbors. That's such an important thing right now. And there are so many different ways. Like one of the things that I do, just being a mom and also living this quarantine lifestyle, is we do a lot of baking with kids, because there's only so many toddler friendly activities that we can do in a day. So we do a lot of baking and just dropping it off at friends' doorsteps, because I can't imagine the anxiety that they're going through. And if baking dinner or bringing by some cookies makes life a little bit easier and allows people to just like sleep better for just one night, that's being a good neighbor, and that's taking care of what's going on. But also, as white people, that means we have to acknowledge it. Yeah. And that's where it's hard.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to finish. I think that, just acknowledging what is going to happen, setting boundaries for yourself, for how you engage with people that, are not going to be fun engaging with, especially around the holidays, like just recognizing what could potentially happen. I think we're in for a really crazy last couple months of the year.
There you have it, our conversation with Laura Lape. I highly recommend to give her a follow on Instagram, as she's a great follow, but also check out her website, lauralape.com. and she has a great little guide about brand accountability on social media. And also, I hope that you have a wonderful election day, as I know it's going to be a lot of angst and worry, and whatever the results will become, we will deal with as a community. But I thought this was a great conversation to really look at the full scope of the Fort Worth community. If you enjoy the 817 podcast, please subscribe, share with a friend, and we'll see you next week. Control your life, control your